Ask a Muslim series. This is our third program, and this one is about women's issues in Islam. And it's been a weakness, a point of contention for many in the Muslim community, but it's also being used by those who are using the status of women in Islam to denigrate Islam, right? So what we want to do today is we want to take the issues that, and to address those issues head on, not to be apologetic. We're going to debunk each issue point by point. We're going to talk from personal experiences, and we're also going to talk, I'm going to address it from a theological perspective. And so we have a solid personal, social, anthropological, as well as theological spectrum. So it's going to come full circle and to be very comprehensive in that regard. And we're going to try to make it as simple and as accessible to everyone in its information. Now, I thank you very much for coming out. So the first topic that we're talking about is...
yeah, well, I think we could start with the conversation you already began. It's about marriage.
Okay. So a lot of the issues that has become a contentious issue in the Muslim community in America in particular, or in the West, is the issue of can a Muslim woman marry a non-Muslim man? And I have, by default, sort of fallen into the role of becoming an imam and officiating interfaith marriages between Muslim women and non-Muslim men. That was basically how Momal found me, and I'll let her tell that story, her journey of finding an imam who will marry her.
Well, it was extremely difficult. So my husband is, he's Catholic. He's a Jewish Catholic, actually. So his family, his family is half Jewish, but he practiced Catholicism, so he's a practicing Catholic. And I'm obviously Muslim. And we were trying to plan our wedding, and I got to the point where I was like, oh my gosh, who is going to marry us? Because I ran into the problem of most imams will not marry people, especially like women who are going to be marrying somebody of another faith. Generally, even in my like social group and our society here, somebody converts. So generally, the person converts to Islam, even if it's on face value. They don't really believe in it, but they just convert for namesake so they can get married. For me and my husband, I really didn't want somebody to just convert. His spirituality is extremely important to him, and I didn't want to impose that on him. And it just felt like it was fake. So, we wanted to be able to honor our religious traditions during our ceremony, and I was at a loss as to trying to find somebody who would be able to marry us. Mostly because, it was very important to me to have some type of religious sanctioning of the wedding, and be able to say, Al-Fatiha and everything like that. To have that was really important to me. And so I was looking, and my parents were at a loss too. We couldn't find anybody. And so one of our family friends happened to have mentioned Annie's name. And so I reached out to her and I explained to her our situation. And I was just so grateful that she was able to provide that service for us. And it was also a nice point that she happened to be a woman, because as a feminist myself, it's so incredibly difficult to find a woman imam anywhere. So it was also an added bonus that she happened to be a woman. So the actual ceremony ended up being very interfaith, in the sense like we had all three Abrahamic traditions represented, and everybody enjoyed it and loved it. It was like a universe. It was like magical. People were really inspired, I feel like, by seeing all three faiths come together in one place. So.
I was really honored to do the wedding because I had a chance to recite the Al-Fatiha and do it in Arabic and then do the English translation and then back to back read the Lord's Prayer. And it was amazing just to see it back to back like that and how similar it is. And then there was Jacob's family read some more passages from the Bible and then from the Torah. And then they broke the glass, and then after that, everyone called out Mazal Tov, Alhamdulillah, all together at the same time. I was so elated. That was like the best part. And what was really beautiful about this is such an new American Muslim tradition. And I think we in the Muslim community here in the United States have to face up to it. If we want to keep members of our faith together and create community, as an American Muslim, we have to be open to these, to a new way of performing marriage services. Now, that said, I'm going to now talk about the theology of why we feel that it's perfectly legitimate and Islamic to do interfaith Islamic weddings. The only thing that the Quran is very clear is who a Muslim man can marry. It's not clear for who the Muslim woman cannot marry. It's encouraged, the woman is encouraged to marry people of faith, believers. Now we can then dissect what the definition of believers mean. But, this is very important to make that distinction. But because the Quran isn't clear, the cultural and the patriarchal interpretation of Islam assumes that, obviously a Muslim woman can only marry a Muslim man, and that is completely made up set of rules. Number one. Number two, 1400 years ago, women were properties of men. And so therefore, actually, not even 1400 years ago, even now, women are properties of men. Some societies and cultures more severe than others. Let's take one example that is still current. In some caste systems in the Hindu communities, when the woman marries, she becomes the property of the husband's family, totally at the mercy of the husband and his family. And we've seen stories on how she becomes completely abused. So this is in the 21st century, so you can imagine how it was 1400 years ago, right? So what the Quran did was for a Muslim woman to marry, the first thing that she gets to do that is insisted in the Quran is a marriage contract. So marriage in Islam is simply a contract between two consenting adults with sound mind. That's it. Everything else is man-made. Okay? So a woman, usually 1400 years ago, when they marry, they become the property of the husband. They lose their identity. They do not get to visit their family. They basically have to adopt the culture, the custom, the language, the religion of the husband. Okay, that's how it used to be. So when the Quran dictated, women, when you marry, you have to have a contract, because then the woman can dictate, you know what, the Quran said, I can actually go out and work. And you know what, the Quran also said, I can keep that money for myself. In other words, I keep my own bank account. I don't have to contribute to the family's well-being. And you know what, I have the right to keep my name, to keep my religion. And you know what, on my mother's birthday, I have the right to go visit my mom, because traditionally, culturally, you couldn't. So that's the purpose of the marriage contract that is dictated in the Quran. And so that's why we have no issues conducting interfaith marriages between Muslim women and non-Muslim men. Now, the current status, what the mosques will say is that, when they get married, the children follow the religion of the father. Well, that's not true. Because I have seen so many mixed interfaith marriages where the father is Muslim and the wife and the mother is non, and what you end up is the children taking the faith tradition of the mother. right? And in this regard, the Jewish community, the Jewish tradition has got it right. So, so that also debunks this patriarchal justification, right? So there's so many layers of justification, from cultural to theological, that completely debunks this current tradition, misinformation that a Muslim woman can only marry a Muslim man.
So, also back in the day, it was a tribal culture, right? So everybody wanted to keep, obviously, the money and all the resources within the tribe. So when a woman would generally get married, she would leave to go to her husband, and if that happens to be in another tribe, you know, she would then take those resources out and go to that other tribe or whatnot. So I think the reason, although it's not written in the Quran, culturally it was more of a practice for women to marry their Muslim partners and their Muslim men. And so women were not encouraged, obviously, to break out of that mold and marry people of other faiths. Although men, however, you know, bringing in somebody from outside, they bring in those resources, they bring in those things. So culturally, you can see how that perpetuation of keeping women within the community kind of kept them from the interfaith marriages. So again, it's more cultural than it is religious.
Like we have this modern saying here, follow the money, right?
It goes way back then. The other thing too is
that even till now we still see a lot of you know, customs where they marry the first cousins, and you know, in the Muslim majority countries. I guess not just the Muslim majority countries, but in some of those cultures, yeah.
So speaking on customs that you wanted to challenge in different forms of abuse that people experience from their family, I know you wanted today to challenge honor killing. So can you speak to challenging this heinous crime?
Well, I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at the news today, but today in Pakistan, a teenage girl was burnt alive by members of her village and her family for helping her friend elope. They took her out and bound her by her hands and then burned her alive. So in the name of honor, because she dishonored you know, the family and the tribe by assisting in this marriage that people did not want to happen. So it's a huge issue, and again a cultural issue. Nothing that is sanctioned in the Quran, and the Quran is kind of used as also a shield to kind of help the perpetrators of these offenses get off and not be punished, because in certain Sharia law, it is a crime against an individual and not society. So that individual, such as the family, can then pardon the perpetrators of these crimes, and many of them are family members. So it would be your family forgiving your family for the crime, or to pay blood money, and that is then, you know, in society washes their hands, and they're not punished for that. I know Pakistan is making strides to try to create laws against this, but it did happen in a more tribal area of Pakistan, which obviously doesn't have a lot of.
So I think probably we should define at this point what is Sharia law, right?
Ani, could you just tell the surah that you said talks about a contract? What is the surah?
Oh, I don't remember the surah number for that. I should memorize it, but no, I don't have it. But it's very clear in the Quran that marriage is a contract between two adults. I should probably post it up. Okay. Sharia law basically is a man-made set of laws. It's 100% man-made. what it is it's basically a political tool in the name of religion. So the politicians of the day have, they would extrapolate from the Quran their understanding of it, and then they would then add cultural norms and then pre-Islamic norms. So the pre-Islamic norms would be things like female genital mutilation and cutting, which is actually a pharaonic practice. And then they would probably add the misogynistic elements because they're all politicians and they want to keep property to themselves and women as a property, and so they make women a property of men, or child marriage is permissible because that is the custom of the day. And so when they put all these mesh up these elements together, they then go to the religious clergy who's on their payroll, and they basically have this clergy give it its religious stamp of approval, and then there you have yourself Sharia law. And so, as Muslims for progressive values, and a lot of scholars of Islam too, it is 100% man-made. It needs to be revisited, and it needs to be revisited in a way that is just for the society that we live in now. And so, if you were going to go to Prophet Muhammad right now and you say, hey, did you hear about this Sharia law? And he's going to look at you, he's going to give you a blank stare. Because it didn't exist. It only started evolving after his passing, right? Because they needed it in order to control their citizens, their population that they have now ruled, right? So this is the Sharia law. So and then they also obviously use misogynistic interpretations of the Quran, like the word, there's this thing that we still use, and that is the man is the guardian of the woman. Now, we're in America. The definition of a guardian is someone who cares for an underage, someone who actually lifts this person up and provides the best opportunity for this person, right? It's not a guardian is not an oppressor. Since when has the definition of a guardian become an oppressor? So, but yet, when the term guardian is used in Sharia law in the context of Muslim majority countries, it is really an oppressive tyrant that is using this guardian definition from the Quran. So that needs to be challenged as well. On the honor killing thing, this all ties in with this issue of controlling women's sexuality. We will delve into some heady stuff shortly, but honor killing is about sexuality. It's not men. Men are completely scot-free of any honor. It's always the girls. It's the woman's sexuality, her vagina. Is she a virgin or not? And we will go into female genital mutilation and cutting. But this is all an ancient patriarchal mindset that actually was revealed to dispel, to challenge, and yet we're still stuck with patriarchy. And this, so what we try to do at every point is just to point out the cultural aspect of it, the theological that debunks the cultural aspect of it, and challenge it legally as well. And so that's the sort of work that we do. Did you have anything else to add to honor? Yeah, you want to ask something?
Maybe I misunderstood you. I think I can be heard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you say that honor killing only applies to women?
You don't see men being punished for honor.
Well, I think you do. I think I've heard stories of a gay kid, a gay son in the family, who gets killed by their brothers or their father or their uncles.
Well, LGBT is lower status than the woman, so unfortunately.
Well,
so yes, absolutely.
Still a man.
Yeah, absolutely. But they're not regarded as men. Okay, they're regarded as a female entity because this is all about being on top. We're going into. So this is sort of a little bit of a veering off the track a little bit, but. Unless you're a straight man, you are inferior to you're inferior, right? And all the rules that otherwise apply, all the rules don't apply unless you're a straight man, right? So honor, absolutely, because you're shaming your family because you're gay. how can a man be gay? You know, this is a whole another different set of mindset, but it is also a mindset of patriarchy. Absolutely. So we can have further discussion on that.
So, Ani, why don't you move into, you were talking about before how a lot of these crimes are focused on controlling women's sexuality, like FGM. Can you cover that as well?
Do you have anything else to say? So FGM, female genital mutilation and cutting, is basically there's 4 different categories. The first one is basically removing a bit of the clitoris. The second one is removing a bit of the clitoris and a little bit of the flesh below it. The third is the removal of all of it. And the fourth is completely sealing the vagina opening and leaving just a little pin, a small hole for the urine and the menstruation to flow, if at all. So this is, the fourth one in particular is called also Pharaonic practice because it actually originated from the Pharaoh days. And it all has to do about controlling the female sexuality. But it also comes from the tradition of the rite of passage, because that's why we have male circumcision as well. Right? You have male circumcision, you have female circumcision. But the female circumcision is really incredibly violent and incredibly painful. Now, for the fourth category in particular, when it's all sewed up, the women, it's hard for them to conceive. I mean, just imagine, first of all, sex is incredibly painful. And I don't know what kind of joy a husband would get from a screaming spouse. You know, I don't get that. But anyway, that's what it is. And if the woman is conceived, the child sometimes, the childbirth process, the child will actually die because the scar tissue around is so hard, and as you know, scar tissue can be very, very hard. And the baby will actually just die in the passage because the head is just stuck. So this is sort of the kind of horrible things that are happening to women in many Muslim and not just Muslim, but in traditional some cultures, Christian, Muslims, and also animist customs. But this is not religious based. It is 150% culturally based. It is about controlling the woman's sexuality. The husband does not feel that, you know, I can leave my wife at home if she's not gone through FGM because she has sexual desires. You know, it's so twisted, it's beyond belief. But there are still men that think that way. But there is good news, and the good news is that Nigeria yesterday banned FGM. Ghana banned FGM a few months ago, I think late last year. Somalia, in principle, has banned FGM. And you know, you're talking about 99% of women have gone through FGM. Now, there's, like I said, different levels of FGM. Like, I come from Malaysia, even though it's not technically recorded as FGM, but it is still, because what they do is they don't cut the clitoris, but they draw blood. And it's just this psychological fulfillment that, oh, we've done the Islamic, because Muslims in Malaysia do this because, oh, we've fulfilled the Islamic duty of circumcision, you know? And so we draw a little bit of blood from the girl's clitoris at a young age, at a baby, during babies. So this is what they do. So there's different levels of FGM. So the practice is, why do we need to do that, right? So we have this massive cultural barriers to overcome. But like I said, the positive things are changing. Now what we've done, and others have done in the Muslim majority countries, is to actually work with the imams to challenge the practice. And so when, for a long time, you know, the secularists would go in and challenge this, you need to change your law, you guys are just a bunch of backward people and so on. That doesn't work. You know, so what's really worked is Muslim women organizations working with imams on the ground and challenging this practice. And the women are now becoming more educated and going to these imams, hey, hey Imam, show me where it says in the Quran that FGM is Quranically sanctioned. And they will not be able to show you that passage. And so what's happened is that there's been really positive stories where the Imam will go away, okay, you know what, I'm going to come back in 3 weeks and I'm going to show you where it's at in the Quran. And the Imam comes back and it's like, you know what, I can't find it. And so then the woman challenges is that then you need to teach the real Islam. And then they are compelled to do that because they're cornered. So I think the best way is for us that we've seen change, positive change, is when we work with imams who are affirming, who are open enough to open their heart and to be honest. There are a lot of imams who are not honest, but there are some good ones out there. And those are the ones that we work with. And we have our initiative called Imams Fashi, where this is exactly what we do in Muslim majority countries, bringing in the imams who are affirming the women's rights, you know, against child marriage, against forced marriages, against FGM, promoting girls' education, and all that good stuff. And there are a lot of good imams out there championing it at their own risk. And you know that they're putting their necks on the line. So we're very proud of these imams. You want me to add?
So, kind of on the hope end that you're bringing in, because a lot of these subjects are are very heavy subjects. And I think a lot of people turn to Muslims for progressive values because you bring hope to people. One thing I hear people say that really sticks out and brings hope is that in MPV we have women leadership, women leading prayer, and we don't have people gender segregated in prayer. Can you speak to MPV's position and leadership in women leading prayer, please?
Right. Well, you know, I think in 2005, Amina Wadud really, she's a feminist scholar of Islam, and she really, you know, was a trailblazer on this issue. And of course, the Muslim world went aflame, a woman leading a co-ed congregation in prayer. But you know, as a scholar of Islam, and there's enough proof that the first female imam was appointed by Prophet Muhammad himself, right? And so, sorry?
It was his wife, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't his wife. No.
She was the first convert.
Yeah, yeah, it wasn't his wife. No. So we've always, you know, the first converts to Islam were women. The first converts to Islam were the slaves, were the oppressed. You know, of course, because Islam empowered them. And so and the Quran is also very clear that at the end of the day, you're going to be judged by your spirituality, whether you're a man or a woman, and your deeds. It doesn't matter what religion you are even. And that's in black and white in the Quran. You know? And so the fact that we are so stuck on Muslim with a capital M, and by the way, Muslim with a small m, which is what the Quran talks about, is a believer. So many different people on this planet are believers in different ways, even animists, Native American practices, right? It's not a capital M. But what happened is we made it into a capital M, so now we become an exclusive club. And so, for us, we want to go back to the essence of Islam, and that is social justice, egalitarianism, equality. That is what the Quran was about when it was revealed. And it was about equal spirituality for men and women. That's also in black and white. So it doesn't say that Imam needs to be a man. It just says a qualified. But in practice, that's what it's become. It's, again, patriarchal. Just can't run away from that. But what's really most annoying and maddening is that we were never taught that the first female imam was appointed by Prophet Muhammad himself. Nobody knows it. It's like a big bloody secret. It's just amazing. And so then the women can't even give the sermon. A woman's voice, the mother, is the first voice. What's so sexual about that? So a woman's body sexuality is not just her hair, her skin, but it's also her voice. You know, and of course, you know, your voice is censored. You know, what about expression? Your right to think, isn't that your God-given right? So we have always believed in the empowerment of all people, men, women, straight, trans, everything in between. That is our philosophy because that is what the Quran is about. And so we practice that in the way we pray, in the way we treat each other. For example, if I lead prayer, then a member of a community who's a man will do the call for prayer. If I do the call for prayer, so a man will lead prayer. So, we're very it's not an ego thing for us, It really isn't, and it shouldn't be. It's about spirituality. If I'm standing beside a man who is married, that I can marry, like in Islam, then there's no sexual tension going on. We're here to pray. And so we call it Mecca style, because in Mecca we don't segregate. Hallelujah. How about you, Mama?
Oh, I just have a question. When's the first time you knew that you found out that in the Quran that Imam, that Muhammad had appointed the first female Imam? How old
The
were you?
first, I was a full-on adult. I was, let's see, probably 36. Yeah, and that was when would do a prayer. And then it was such shock. It was oh wow, and then there's reading about it and studying about it. And so, and what's really interesting is that none of the traditional mosques and imams and sheikhs can actually argue with that, So, because they know it's true, right? And they will say, oh, our community is not ready. Well, it's 1,400 years later, it's still not ready. Or, because of the way we bow, it's sexual, the man will be looking at the butt of the woman. So, women are looking at the butt of the man too. So, it's let's get our heads out of this gutter, because we're here to pray.
And I think it also, it just shows the way this whole a man would be looking at the behind of a woman and stuff like that. It's like they're saying that men are weak beings, and that women have this crazy capacity, power over them. And and that's just a little ridiculous, And in Islam,
Never mind.
You can say whatever.
Did you mention the name of the first female imam?
Yeah.
Waraka.
What does she?
Waraka. W-A-R-A-Q-A-H.
Does she have any writings?
No. There's no writings.
she was appointed to do this.
No, so what happened was, so she was an elder woman, and she wanted to move, she didn't live in Medina, and she wanted to move closer to where Prophet Muhammad, to Medina, to pray with Prophet Muhammad. And then Prophet Muhammad said, no, you know what, it's better if you stay with your community, and I can give you a better jihad, and that is, your jihad is to lead prayer, to be an imam. And she was an elder woman, like I said. And so what then he did was he appointed her a muadin, someone to do the azan, right? Because that he needed someone to do the azan to call for prayer. So the fact that, so here you have a woman who's imam and then also appoints a muadin by Prophet Muhammad to assist her. In itself was like, okay, this was a community. It wasn't, because what the conservative says, oh, she was only praying, she was only leading prayer, her members of her family. But that was not true. Yeah. Well, you don't need a muadin, to do, yeah, exactly.
So before we move into the Q&A section, this is the part where they're going to ask y'all questions, okay? So their two questions are for you. At this time, what is something you heard that really stuck out to you or resonated with you? And what is a question that you still have unanswered? And we want you to turn to somebody next to you and discuss those two things. What is one thing that you heard tonight? It could be more than one thing, but one is price of admission that stuck out to you. And what is a question you still have left unanswered if you want to help formulate with that person next to you? So go ahead and turn to one of your neighbors and we'll give you a couple minutes to talk about that. Go ahead.
I know.
Sorry.
And why don't you all turn with each other?